My name is Everly, and I am 32 years old. It is a Tuesday afternoon in Northern California. I am standing in my kitchen wiping down the quartz countertops when the doorbell rings. A sharp, confident sound. I open the door to find a woman in a beige pantsuit standing on my porch holding a clipboard. Her ID badge reads, Santa Clara County Child Protective Services. She tells me she received an anonymous report. A report claiming my home is a hazard. A report claiming my 6-year-old son Leo and my 4-year-old daughter Maya are neglected. A report stating I am mentally unstable and unfit to parent. I do not scream. I do not slam the door. I step aside and invite her in. For 45 minutes, she walks through my immaculate home. She opens my fully stocked refrigerator. She watches Leo and Maya playing quietly with their wooden blocks on the living room rug. I sit at my kitchen island and answer her questions with the clinical precision of a woman who assesses risk for a living. I am a cybersecurity risk analyst. Panic is not in my vocabulary. When the interview is over, she closes her folder. She offers a warm, apologetic smile and says the 5 words that break me. Your home is wonderful, Everly. She leaves. I lock the door behind her, and I lean my forehead against the cool wood of the entryway. I cry. Not because I am afraid of losing my children. I cry because of the chilling, absolute clarity of knowing exactly who made that call. It was not a vindictive ex-boyfriend. It was not a busybody neighbor. The call came from my own mother, Diane, and my father, Richard. They weaponized the state child welfare system against me. They tried to have my children taken away to punish me for a boundary I set exactly 3 weeks prior. If you have ever had to set a boundary with toxic relatives only to have them retaliate by trying to destroy your life, I need you to hit that subscribe button to Hazel Tells Stories right now. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is, because the retaliation I am about to unleash on my own parents is going to be spectacular. Now let me take you back 3 weeks so you can understand why my parents were desperate enough to risk filing a false CPS report. I grew up as the invisible daughter, the reliable, quiet backup plan. My younger sister, Brooke, was the undisputed golden child. Brooke lives in a luxury apartment in Los Angeles, curating a flawless Instagram aesthetic of designer bags and leased cars. She has never held a job for more than 6 months. She lives entirely on the perception of wealth funded exclusively by our parents who use guilt and manipulation to extract loans from me whenever Brooke overdraws her accounts. 3 weeks ago, I came home early from the office. I walked into my study and found my father, Richard, alone. He was aggressively digging through my locked filing cabinet, the specific drawer where I keep Leo and Maya's birth certificates and their social security cards. When I demanded to know what he was doing, he froze. He held a stack of manila folders in his hands and stammered that he was just looking for scrap paper. My father is a retired salesman. He has a long history of financial manipulation and moving money around to cover his mistakes. I did not argue. I did not ask for an apology. I took the folders from his hands. I escorted him out of my house. I immediately revoked their unsupervised access to my children, and I changed all the locks on my doors. The CPS call was their brutal retaliation. It was a warning shot fired across my bow designed to terrify me into submission and force me to hand over the keys to my life. They expected me to shrink. They forgot what I do for a living. To understand why a grandfather would pry open a locked drawer, and why a grandmother would dial a state agency to report her own daughter, you have to understand the economy of my family. I was never a child to them. I was a ledger. Brooke, on the other hand, was the investment. Brooke is 28 years old. She lives in a 2-bedroom penthouse in downtown Los Angeles. She drives a pearl-white luxury SUV that smells like new leather and expensive perfume. If you look at her social media feed, you will see a carefully curated gallery of weekend trips to beach resorts, designer handbags resting on marble tables, and aesthetic coffee cups. What you will not see is a paycheck. Brooke has not maintained a steady job since she graduated college. She works in abstract concepts. She tells people she is consulting, influencing, and networking. These are words she uses to describe unemployment while my parents fund her entire existence. Diane and Richard are not wealthy. They are retired suburbanites clinging to the illusion of status. My father spent his career in mid-level sales, mastering the art of the pitch and the perception of success. When his commission checks dried up, his ego did not. To maintain Brooke's lifestyle, they drained their savings. Then they started coming to me. It always started with a phone call from Diane. Her voice would drop an octave, adopting a rehearsed tone of maternal concern. She would say, "Brooke is just going through a rough patch, Beverly. The rent in Los Angeles is so unreasonable. She just needs $2,000 to bridge the gap until her new client signs." If I said no, my father would step in. He would use words like family loyalty and duty. He would remind me that I had a good salary from my tech firm and that hoarding my wealth was selfish. For years, I paid the toll just to keep the peace. I subsidized my sister's vanity so I would not have to listen to my parents complain. But everything changed when I had Leo and Maya. My financial priorities shifted from appeasing my parents to protecting my children. I stopped writing the checks. I told Diane the Bank of Everly was closed. Brooke would have to find a roommate or get an actual job. The response was a chilling silence followed by a sharp escalation in my parents' desperation. They started visiting more frequently. They offered to babysit. They claimed they wanted to be involved grandparents. I thought they were finally adjusting to the new boundaries. I was entirely wrong. They were not looking for quality time with their grandchildren. They were looking for new lines of credit. That brings us to 3 weeks ago. It was a Thursday. I left the cybersecurity firm early because a server migration finished ahead of schedule. I pulled into my driveway at 2 in the afternoon. My parents were supposed to be watching the kids until 5. I walked through the front door. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a house containing a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I walked down the hallway. I found Leo and Maya sitting on the living room rug watching a cartoon on the television. They were alone. I moved toward the back of the house toward my home office. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. My father was standing behind my desk. He had a metal letter opener in his hand. He was wedging it into the top drawer of my oak filing cabinet. It was the only drawer in the house I kept under lock and key. The drawer that holds my tax returns, my property deed, and most importantly, the birth certificates and social security cards for Leo and Maya. I stood in the doorway and watched him pry the lock open. The metal snapped with a sharp crack. He pulled the drawer out and reached inside. He pulled out the dark blue folder containing my children's most sensitive identifying documents. "Dad." I said it quietly, but the sound made him jump. He spun around, his face drained of color. The folder slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Papers spilled onto the rug. I saw the distinctive green patterned edges of a social security card peeking out from a birth certificate. He tried to laugh, a hollow, nervous sound that died in his throat. "Everly," he stammered. "I was just looking for some scrap paper to write down a grocery list. I needed a blank sheet." I looked at the metal letter opener in his hand. I looked at the broken lock on the drawer. I looked at the folder on the floor. "Scrap paper," I repeated. "In a locked cabinet." I did not raise my voice. I bent down and picked up the folder. I checked the contents. Both cards were there. I put them in my pocket. I looked at the man who raised me, and I saw exactly what he was, a desperate salesman out of options. I told him to gather his things. I walked him to the front door where Diane was just returning from the driveway, having supposedly gone to fetch her sunglasses. I told them both their babysitting privileges were permanently revoked. I told them they were no longer welcome in my home unsupervised. I closed the door in their faces. The very next morning, a locksmith arrived and replaced every deadbolt on my property. I upgraded my home security system. I built a perimeter they could not breach. I took away their access. I took away their control. In the twisted logic of my parents, taking away their control is an act of war. They needed a way to force my hand. They needed a weapon powerful enough to terrify me into unlocking that door and letting them back in. So they picked up the phone and called the state. They fabricated a story of neglect and instability. They sent a government agency to my doorstep to show me what happens when I stop being obedient. They thought the fear of losing my children would break me. They thought I would call them begging for help, apologizing for my disrespect, and handing them back the keys to my life. They were waiting for me to surrender. Just hours after the caseworker drove away from my house, my phone lit up with a text message from Diane. A message that proved everything I suspected. A message that handed me the exact tool I needed to begin dismantling their entire world. The house is silent. I have just tucked Leo and Maya into their beds. I read them a story about a bear who loses his hat. I smooth the blankets over their shoulders. I listen to their breathing slow down and shift into the steady rhythm of deep sleep. They have no idea that a stranger from the county was sitting in their living room a few hours ago, evaluating whether they should be removed from my care. They are safe. They are protected. I walk down the hallway into the kitchen. The sun has set, and the room is painted in the gray shadows of early evening. I pour myself a glass of cold water from the refrigerator. I set the glass on the granite counter. Next to the glass sits my phone. The screen is dark, then it vibrates. A brief, harsh buzz against the stone surface. The screen illuminates the dim kitchen. I have one new message. The sender is Diane. I do not pick up the device immediately. I let it sit there glowing. I take a slow breath. I know what this message will be before I even read the words. I know the woman who typed it. I know her rhythm and her strategy. I pick up the phone and tap the screen. The message reads exactly like this. We heard you had a visit today. We just want what is best for our grandchildren, Everly. Let us come over this weekend or things might get more complicated. I stare at the digital text. It is a masterpiece of suburban manipulation. It is a ransom note wrapped in the delicate lace of maternal concern. Let us break down the anatomy of this threat. We heard you had a visit today. The State Child Welfare Agency does not publish their daily inspection routes. They do not send out newsletters detailing which homes they are investigating. The only possible way my parents could know the caseworker stood on my porch is because they were the ones who orchestrated the visit. Then comes the justification. We just want what is best for our grandchildren. This is the moral shield. Toxic people always drape their behavior in righteous intentions. They need to believe they are the heroes of the narrative even while they are setting the house on fire. Finally, we reach the demand. Let us come over this weekend, or things might get more complicated. There is no question mark. It is a directive. It is raw, unfiltered extortion. Give us physical access to your home and your children, or we will escalate the attacks against you. We will make your life a nightmare of legal battles and government scrutiny. My parents expect a very specific reaction to this text message. They are waiting in their quiet living room 50 miles away, anticipating the sound of their phone ringing. They expect the old version of their daughter. The compliant, invisible girl who spent 30 years tiptoeing around their fragile egos and apologizing for things she never did. They expect me to panic. They want me to crumble under the weight of the threat. They assume my fear of losing my children will override any boundary I tried to build. They think I will call them in tears, begging them to call off the dogs, promising to forget everything that happened in the home office. If you are listening to this right now, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever read a message from someone who shares your DNA and realized you are looking at a hostage negotiation? Have you ever felt that cold drop in your stomach when the people who are supposed to be your safety net turn out to be the trap? If you know that exact feeling, drop a comment right now. It is a very specific type of betrayal and it changes you forever. My parents think they have me backed into a corner, but they fundamentally misunderstand how my brain works. They forget the profession I chose. I am a cybersecurity risk analyst. I spend my days dealing with threat actors. I deal with digital extortion, compromised networks, and sophisticated breaches. When a critical system is hacked, an analyst does not react by crying. We do not negotiate with the malware. We do not panic. We isolate the compromised node. We secure the perimeter, and then we hunt. We trace the hack back to the source code. I do not respond to Diane with hysteria. I do not reply to the text message at all. I leave it marked as read. I want her to see that I opened it. I want her to sit in the uncomfortable silence of my non-compliance. Instead, I process the threat as a data point. In incident response, every action a threat actor takes gives you information about their motive. You just have to ask the right questions. Why did they change their tactics? For decades, Diane preferred soft power. She used passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. She used sighs of disappointment. My father used lectures about family duty. Extortion is a severe escalation. It is a heavy, blunt instrument. You do not use a hammer unless you are desperate to break through a wall. They are desperate. The CPS report proves it. Risking a false report to a government agency is a dangerous game. It invites scrutiny. It creates a paper trail. People who are hiding regular everyday secrets do not invite state investigators into their orbit. You only take a risk that large when the alternative is total ruin. What kind of ruin were my parents facing? I go back to the inciting incident. I go back to the image of my father holding a metal letter opener prying open the oak drawer. If this was just about maintaining control over me, the CPS call would be enough. But the catalyst was not control. The catalyst was the contents of that specific drawer. He was not looking for scrap paper. He was looking for two very specific strings of 9 digits. The social security numbers assigned to a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. He failed to secure those numbers physically because I walked into the room and caught him. 3 weeks later, they try to force their way back into my house using the government as a battering ram. They do not just want to see their grandchildren. They need the data. I think about my sister Brooke. When I cut off the financial supply months ago, Brooke did not change her lifestyle. She did not sell her designer bags. She did not return her leased luxury vehicle. She continued to post photos from expensive restaurants and weekend getaways. Her spending did not slow down. Where was the capital coming from if the Bank of Beverly was closed? The pieces of the puzzle are floating in the dark. I just need to turn on the light. I pull one of the leather bar stools away from the kitchen island and sit down. The house is still perfectly quiet. I reach into my leather work tote resting on the adjacent chair. I pull out my laptop. It is a heavy-duty machine issued by my firm. It is equipped with auditing software and secure network protocols the general public never sees. I place the device on the granite counter. I open the lid. The screen flares to life, casting a pale blue glow across my hands. I type in my encryption password. I connect to my secure virtual private network. I am no longer a terrified mother dealing with toxic relatives. I am a professional hunting a threat. My parents thought they could hack my life. They are about to discover that I am the firewall. I place my fingers on the keyboard. I am going to find the digital breadcrumbs they left behind, and I am going to follow them all the way to the end. The kitchen is quiet save for the low hum of the refrigerator. The blue light from my laptop screen illuminates the granite counter. I start my investigation with the most obvious target: myself. I open a secure browser window and run a comprehensive sweep of my own social security number across the primary credit bureaus. I bypass the consumer-facing portals and pull the raw data directly from the reporting agencies. The report generates in seconds. I scan the lines of text. My score sits in the high 800s. I have 0 derogatory marks. I have 0 unauthorized inquiries. My mortgage is current. My revolving accounts show normal everyday usage. My financial identity is a fortress. I close the tab. A brief wave of relief washes over me, but it evaporates the moment I picture my father standing in my home office. I remember the metallic snap of the lock on my filing cabinet. Richard bypassed my personal financial records. He did not search for my tax returns or my investment portfolios. His hands were focused entirely on the blue folder, the folder belonging to a first grader and a preschooler. Minors do not have credit profiles. Under normal circumstances, running a background check on a 6-year-old yields an error message. The system should return a blank slate. But I do not rely on standard consumer checks. I am a risk analyst. I open a specialized tracing matrix issued by my firm. It is a proprietary tool designed to detect synthetic fraud across federal databases and commercial lending clearinghouses. I type in the 9 digits belonging to my son Leo. I press the execute key. The progress bar loads across the screen. I prepare myself to see a null return. Instead, the screen populates with dense rows of financial data. A credit profile exists. It is not just a profile, it is an extensive active financial footprint. My pulse, steady and cold, thrums in my ears. I type in the 9 digits belonging to my 4-year-old daughter, Maya. I run the query. The result is identical. Columns of active accounts, outstanding balances, and recent hard inquiries flood my monitor. The scattered pieces of the puzzle snap together with a sickening clarity. The unexpected visit from the state welfare caseworker. The extortion text from Diane. The broken lock on the oak drawer. My parents did not call the authorities out of simple malice. They did not weaponize the state just to teach me a lesson about respect. They called the caseworker out of sheer, unadulterated panic. When I changed the deadbolts and revoked their unsupervised access, I did not just establish a personal boundary. I locked them out of their ongoing crime scene. I look at the glowing screen and I dissect the anatomy of their crime. Synthetic identity theft is a highly specific breed of financial fraud. Amateurs steal the wallet of a living adult. That is a sloppy tactic. It triggers automated text alerts and immediate fraud freezes. Sophisticated predators operate differently. They take the clean, unmonitored social security number of a child. They pair that pristine number with a different date of birth and a fabricated physical address. They apply for small, high-risk credit lines. They pay those small lines off using illicit funds to artificially inflate the synthetic credit score. Once the fabricated profile appears legitimate to automated underwriting algorithms, they strike. They secure massive payouts, auto loans, platinum cards, commercial lines of credit. My parents needed the physical cards from my filing cabinet to pass advanced verification checks for whatever new scam they were launching. They needed the document issue dates to bypass a security hurdle. I stopped them before they could get the paper. So they tried to use the government to force their way back inside. My fingers fly across the keyboard. I am no longer a mother grieving a betrayal. I am an auditor compiling a prosecutorial dossier. I isolate the raw origination data for every fraudulent account tied to my children. I navigate through the encrypted firewalls of the lenders to extract the digital footprints. Fraud always leaves a trail. Every online application captures an internet protocol address. Every digital signature logs a unique device identifier. I trace the routing numbers used to make the minimum payments on these illicit accounts. The internet protocol addresses do not bounce through overseas proxy servers. They do not hide behind complex virtual private networks. My parents are arrogant, but they are not hackers. The data maps directly to a residential broadband connection in a specific zip code. It is the exact zip code where my parents live. I pull the device identifiers. The alphanumeric codes match the tablet Richard brings to family dinners. I review the physical addresses listed on the credit applications. They do not use my home address. They use a private mailbox rented in a strip mall 2 towns over. The mailbox is registered under a misspelled variation of Diane's maiden name. I take a screenshot of a digital signature time-stamped 3 days before the caseworker knocked on my door. I organize the files into a secure encrypted folder on my desktop. I label the directory Exhibit A. I sit back in my chair and look at the evidence. I realize exactly how Diane and Richard view my self-made stability. To a healthy family, a daughter who builds a successful career and provides a safe home for her children is a source of pride. To my parents, my stability was an obstacle. It was an untapped resource they felt entitled to harvest. When I refused to willingly hand over my capital to fund their golden child, they simply bypassed me. They targeted the most vulnerable people in my house. They strapped financial anchors to the ankles of a preschooler and a first grader. If I had not caught my father in that office, Leo and Maya would have turned 18, only to discover they were buried in tens of thousands of dollars of default judgments. Their credit would be ruined before they even learned how to drive. My phone sits on the granite counter beside my laptop. Diane is still waiting for my reply to her extortion text. A normal person would block the number. A normal person would call the police right now, screaming into the receiver, demanding immediate arrests. I do neither. I leave the lines of communication wide open. I need my parents comfortable. I need them feeling superior. I need them to believe their suburban manipulation is working flawlessly. A cornered threat actor will panic, destroy evidence, and scatter. An overconfident threat actor will hand you the remaining pieces of the puzzle on a silver platter. I do not reply to the text. Let Diane sweat in the silence. Let her assume I am crying in the dark, trying to figure out how to appease her. I turn my attention back to the monitor. I have the digital footprints. I have the locations. I have the hardware identifiers. Now I need to see the actual damage. I need to know the exact price my parents placed on the heads of my son and daughter. I click into the specific account ledgers to review the outstanding balances. I open the first portable document file. The billing statement loads onto the screen. The numbers render in sharp black text against a white background. The sheer scale of the theft forces me to push my chair back from the island. The billing statement loads on my screen. The digital header displays the full legal name of my 6-year-old son. Below his name is an account summary from a Tier 1 automotive lender. I scan the columns of data and the numbers hit me like physical blows. The principal balance on the loan sits at $65,000. The account status is flagged in bright red text. It is 90 days past due. The lender has already initiated the early stages of asset recovery. They are preparing for repossession. I open a new tab and pull up the records for my 4-year-old daughter. Maya has 3 separate platinum credit cards attached to her Social Security number. I review the utilization rates. Every single card is maxed out. The combined revolving debt hovers just over $30,000. The interest rates are astronomical because the accounts were flagged as high risk by the issuing banks. I sit in the quiet of my kitchen and try to reconcile the two realities existing in my house. Down the hall, Leo is fast asleep, clutching a stuffed dinosaur holding a plastic trophy he won at a weekend soccer game. In the digital world, he is a delinquent debtor, dodging automotive repo men. Maya is sleeping in princess pajamas with a nightlight glowing in the corner of her room. In the financial sector, she is a high-rolling consumer defaulting on luxury lines of credit. I look at the mechanics of the approval process. A computer algorithm evaluates risk based on data inputs. A child has no data. To bypass the automated underwriting protocols, my parents executed a precise maneuver. They digitally spliced my children's unmonitored Social Security numbers with my father's established credit history. Richard has decades of borrowing history, mortgages and paid-off sedans and old department store cards. By tying his aging profile to their fresh 9-digit numbers, he tricked the lending algorithms. To the banking software, Leo and Maya did not look like kindergarteners. They looked like 60-year-old professionals with immaculate, unblemished records. My parents took the pristine financial slates of their own grandchildren and covered them in toxic debt. When you uncover financial fraud within a family, your first instinct is to look for a desperate motive. You assume the perpetrators were drowning. You picture medical bills piling up on a kitchen counter or a notice of foreclosure pinned to a front door. You try to rationalize the theft as a misguided act of survival. I open the transaction ledgers for the 3 platinum credit cards. I want to see exactly where my parents spent $30,000. I expect to find charges for utility companies or grocery stores or property taxes for their suburban home. I scroll through the line items. There are no charges for utilities. There are no grocery store receipts. The transaction history consists entirely of large cash wire transfers and balance transfers to third-party vendors. I isolate the routing numbers for the receiving accounts. I run a reverse search through a commercial registry database. The receiving accounts do not belong to local businesses in Northern California. They belong to an elite property management firm located in downtown Los Angeles. It is the exact leasing office that manages the luxury penthouse where my sister Brooke lives. I switch over to the origination documents for the $65,000 auto loan. I check the dealer identification code. The vehicle was not purchased at a local lot. The loan was initiated at a high-end import dealership in Beverly Hills. The make and model listed on the contract match a pearl white luxury SUV. The puzzle pieces lock together with a sickening metallic click. My parents were not stealing to keep a roof over their own heads. They were not drowning in medical debt. The stolen capital bypassed their bank accounts entirely. They wired the funds directly into Brooke's curated lifestyle. Brooke spends her days posting filtered photos for her thousands of followers. She projects an image of effortless wealth. She writes captions about manifesting success and living her best life. She sips $20 lattes and wears shoes that cost more than my first car. Her entire reality is a stage production, and my children are the ones paying the production costs. My parents literally mortgaged the futures of a preschooler and a first grader to fund my sister's Instagram aesthetic. They sold the financial security of their grandchildren to buy the golden child a Mercedes and a penthouse view. I sit back on my bar stool. The glow of the screen casts long shadows against the kitchen cabinets. I feel a profound chilling shift in my chest. Any lingering trace of familial obligation I held on to evaporates. You cannot negotiate with people who view your children as collateral. You cannot compromise with predators who sacrifice the youngest members of their own bloodline on the altar of vanity. Diane and Richard did not just cross a line. They burned the concept of family to the ground. I look at the digital paperwork again. A new question begins to form in my mind. A question that requires a deeper level of investigation. Brooke has lived in that Los Angeles penthouse for 2 years. She has driven that pearl-white SUV for 18 months. The math does not align with a passive beneficiary. A person does not accidentally sign a lease for a luxury apartment without proving income. A person does not accidentally drive a $65,000 vehicle off a Beverly Hills lot without signing a title and registration. My parents orchestrated the data theft. They provided the social security numbers, but they live in Northern California. They could not physically drive the car off the lot in Southern California. They could not hand the physical keys to Brooke without an explanation. Brooke is not just a spoiled daughter oblivious to where her allowance comes from. She had to know the origin of the funds. She had to sign the delivery paperwork. I need to know her exact level of complicity. I need to know if she turned a blind eye to the fraud or if she helped design it. I minimize the banking portals. I open a new secure terminal on my desktop. I have the hardware identifiers for my parents' devices. Now I need the communication logs. I need the text messages and the emails sent between Diane, Richard, and Brooke over the last 2 years. I am going to pull the digital curtain back all the way. I am going to find out exactly what the golden child knew and when she knew it. The trap I am building requires precise measurements. I cannot execute the final phase until I know exactly how many people need to fall inside it. I crack my knuckles and begin to type. I sit in the dark kitchen. The screen of my laptop is the only light source in the room. Finding the financial documents was only the first step. Tracing the money to Los Angeles proved the motive, but I need to establish the exact architecture of the conspiracy. I need to know if the golden child was a naive recipient or a willing co-conspirator. I pull up a digital backdoor I installed on my father's tablet months ago. He asked me to fix his wireless internet connection during a family dinner. I secured his network, but I also set up a synchronized cloud backup for his emails and text messages, just in case he fell victim to a phishing scam. Today, that safety net becomes my surveillance feed. I open the archived inbox. I filter the search parameters by my sister's name and specific financial terms. The query returns dozens of hits. I click on an email thread dated 4 months ago. The subject line reads, "Lease renewal." Brooke sent the initial message. She complains that her property management company requires proof of updated income or a new guarantor to extend her penthouse lease. She writes that she cannot downgrade to a normal apartment because it would ruin her personal brand. Richard replies within the hour. He tells her not to panic. He writes that he is working on a new funding source. Brooke does not ask him if he got a new job. She does not ask if he is taking out a second mortgage. She replies with a single demanding sentence. "Just fix it, Dad." I scroll forward in the timeline. 2 weeks later, another email exchange appears. This time, Richard uses specific terminology. He tells Brooke the dealership in Beverly Hills requires a pristine credit profile to approve the lease on the new luxury sport utility vehicle. He writes that his own score took a hit, but he found a workaround. He literally calls it a credit hack in black and white text. He explicitly types out his plan to use Maya's clean slate to piggyback the approval. He tells Brooke she will need to sign the paperwork using a dual guarantor structure. Brooke reads that email. She sees her father's written intent to use a 4-year-old child's identity to bypass an automotive underwriter. A normal aunt would call the police. A normal human being would demand he stop immediately. Brooke does neither. Her reply is time-stamped 10 minutes later. She asks if the hack will clear in time for her to pick up the car before her weekend trip to Palm Springs. She knew. She read the blueprint of the fraud, and she co-signed the execution. My sister has spent her entire life insulated from the concept of consequence. When she wrecked her first car at 17, my parents bought her a new one the next day. When she dropped out of college, they paid off her student loans and funded a gap year in Europe. She grew up believing our parents' checkbook was an infinite resource. She sleeps until noon. She spends her afternoons taking photos of expensive meals. She views the rest of the world as supporting characters in her personal movie. She has no concept of struggle. When their personal capital finally dried up, she did not care where the next batch of money came from. She happily looked the other way while they robbed her niece and nephew. I lean away from the monitor. I rub my eyes. The pieces of the puzzle shift again, revealing a darker, more calculated image. I think back to the caseworker standing on my porch today. I think about the extortion text Diane sent earlier tonight. I thought they called Child Protective Services to punish me for changing the locks. I thought they wanted to force their way back into my house to retrieve the physical Social Security cards. But looking at the dates on these emails, a new chilling clarity washes over me. The state welfare report was not just a tantrum, it was a tactical distraction. If a mother is suddenly thrust into a legal battle with the government over the custody of her children, she enters a state of perpetual panic. She spends her days calling lawyers. She spends her nights cleaning her house and organizing pediatrician records. A mother fighting to keep her kids from being placed in foster care does not have the time or the mental bandwidth to run deep web credit checks on her toddlers. Diane and Richard knew the automotive repo men were closing in on the luxury vehicle. They knew the platinum cards were maxed out and defaulting. They knew the financial crater was about to explode. They reported me to the government to keep me looking the wrong way. They wanted me so blinded by the fear of losing my family that I would never notice they had already stolen my children's futures. They handed me a loaded weapon, assuming I would never look down the barrel. They thought I was too soft to pull the trigger. I connect my laptop to the wireless printer sitting on the desk in my home office. The quiet hum of the machine breaks the silence in the house. I print the email thread detailing the credit hack. I print the billing statements from the platinum cards. I print the origination documents from the Beverly Hills dealership, displaying Brooke's signature right next to my father's forged authorizations. The printer spits out page after page of undeniable physical proof. I gather the warm sheets of paper. I walk over to my supply closet and take out a thick, heavy-duty blue binder. The kind I use to present risk assessment reports to corporate board members. I punch holes in the paper. I snap the metal ring shut. I use plastic tabs to organize the evidence. I label the first section identity theft. I label the second section wire fraud. I label the third section conspiracy. The physical weight of the binder is satisfying. It is concrete. It is irrefutable. I trace my fingers over the plastic cover of the binder. Inside this folder is the death warrant for my parents' suburban facade and my sister's fabricated lifestyle. Breaking a trauma bond does not happen in a therapist office. It happens in moments like this. For 32 years, I conditioned myself to believe that if I was reliable enough and quiet enough, my family would eventually value me. I accepted the role of the invisible daughter because I thought it was the price of admission to their love. But staring at this blue binder, the illusion shatters. They do not love me. They view me as a host organism. When I stopped providing resources, they simply bypassed me and attached themselves to my children. The transition is instantaneous and permanent. I feel the last remaining thread of daughterly obligations snap. I no longer care about protecting their reputation. I no longer care about keeping the peace at holiday dinners. I am no longer a daughter navigating a toxic family dynamic. I am an auditor holding the evidence of a federal crime, and I know exactly what to do with it. But I cannot simply confront them. Confrontation gives guilty people time to destroy evidence and coordinate their lies. I need to lock them in a room where they cannot escape. I need to hand this blue binder to someone who has the power to put them in handcuffs. I check the time on my phone. The local police precinct is open 24 hours a day. I grab my car keys and walk out the door. The digital clock on my dashboard reads 2 in the morning. The suburban streets of Northern California are dark and empty. I drive past rows of manicured lawns and sleeping houses. The blue binder rests on the passenger seat next to me. I do not call my parents. I do not send an angry text message demanding an explanation. When you are dealing with predators, you never announce your next move. A confrontation only gives guilty people the timeline they need to shred documents and coordinate their alibis. I am not giving them a single second to prepare. I pull into the visitor parking lot of the local police precinct. I walk through the sliding glass doors into the brightly lit lobby. The fluorescent lights hum overhead. A desk sergeant looks up from his computer monitor. I do not ask to file a standard police report. I ask for the division that handles white-collar financial crimes. I request a detective who specializes in identity theft and wire fraud. The sergeant tells me to take a seat. 30 minutes later, a man in a rumpled gray suit walks into the lobby. He introduces himself as Detective Reynolds. He looks tired. He holds a notepad and a pen, assuming I am here to report a stolen credit card or a phishing email scam. He leads me down a quiet hallway into a small interview room. The walls are bare. A single metal table sits in the center. I place the thick blue binder on the table. I slide it across the metal surface. I tell him my 4-year-old daughter and my 6-year-old son are the victims of a sophisticated synthetic identity theft ring. I tell him the perpetrators are my own parents. Reynolds opens the plastic cover. He pulls out a pen and begins to read. I sit in silence and watch his posture shift. He stops leaning back in his chair. He sits up straight. He turns the first page, then the second, then the third. He traces his finger over the printed email threads where my father explicitly outlines the credit hack to my sister. He examines the internet protocol logs I extracted from the lending platforms. He studies the signature documents from the Beverly Hills luxury car dealership. I explain the architecture of the fraud. I walk him through the process of splicing an unmonitored social security number with an established credit profile. I show him the transaction ledgers, proving the illicit funds bypassed my parents' bank accounts and flowed directly into the property management firm in Los Angeles. Reynolds looks up from the paperwork. He closes the binder. He asks me who compiled this dossier. I tell him I am a cybersecurity risk analyst. He sets his pen down and says I just handed him a closed case. He explains the legal reality of what my parents have done. This is no longer a simple local jurisdiction issue. My father bypassed corporate underwriting algorithms using the identity of a minor. The Tier 1 automotive lender he defrauded is headquartered in Texas. The platinum credit cards belong to a financial institution based in Delaware. Every time my father clicks submit on an application, the data packets cross state lines. Routing illicit digital funds across federal jurisdictions triggers a federal inquiry. The local precinct will not handle the prosecution. The United States Department of Justice handles this level of wire fraud. The penalties are severe. The prison sentences are mandatory. But having the financial documents is only half the battle. I look Reynolds in the eye. I tell him I want them prosecuted for the extortion. I tell him about the visit from the State Child Welfare Agency. I show him the text message currently sitting unread on my phone. The message from Diane demanding physical access to my children, or else things will get more complicated. Reynolds reads the threat. He nods slowly. He tells me the federal prosecutors will want undeniable proof that Diane and Richard are actively leveraging the false government report to cover their financial tracks. A vague text message is a good start, but it leaves room for a defense attorney to claim a simple misunderstanding. We need them to articulate their demands clearly. We need them to put the extortion in writing. We need them to explicitly tie the harassment to a financial arrangement. We establish a strict timeline. The federal authorities need a few days to process the evidence and secure the warrants for the electronic devices in my parents' home. During that window, I have to play the role of the terrified victim. I have to draw them out. I leave the precinct as the sun begins to rise over the hills. The sky turns a pale gray. I drive back to my quiet house. I unlock the new deadbolts. I walk into my kitchen and sit at the granite island. The house is still silent. My children are still sleeping safely in their beds. I pick up my phone. I stare at the message from my mother. Diane thrives on submission. When I was a teenager, she would punish me with days of silent treatment over perceived slights until I broke down and wrote her an apology letter. She needs to feel powerful. She views every relationship as a hierarchy where she sits at the top. If I fight back, she will raise her shields and become cautious. But if I surrender, she will become sloppy. I am going to give her exactly what she craves. I open the text thread. I begin to type. Every word is carefully selected to stroke her ego and feed her arrogance. I play the part of the defeated, exhausted mother who has finally realized she cannot win a war against her own family. You win. I type the 2 words that will seal her fate. I add a space and continue the performance. I do not want to lose the kids. Let us meet for dinner on Sunday to discuss an arrangement and the financial help you asked for. I read the message twice. It hits all the psychological triggers. It concedes defeat. It references the children confirming her leverage worked. It suggests a physical meeting, giving her the illusion of control. And most importantly, it brings up the topic of money, opening the door for her to confess her financial demands. I press send. The text bubble turns blue. The bait is in the water. I set the phone face down on the counter. My parents are sitting in their suburban house, blinded by their own unearned confidence. They think they have outsmarted the system. They think they have broken my spirit. They are swimming straight toward the hook. Now I just need them to bite down hard enough to leave a permanent mark. The phone screen illuminates the dark kitchen counter 3 minutes after I send the surrender text. Diane does not wait. She does not let the tension settle. She replies with the speed of a predator claiming a kill. Her message reads exactly as I anticipated. I knew you would come to your senses, Everly. Family is everything. We will see you Sunday to finalize the details. Notice what is missing from her response. There is no relief that her grandchildren are safe. There is no maternal comfort. There is only the smug satisfaction of a woman who believes her extortion tactic worked flawlessly. She views my compliance as a trophy. But a text message from a mother is not enough to secure a federal indictment. Defense attorneys dismantle text messages every day in courtrooms. They claim the phone was hacked. They claim the words were taken out of context. They argue that informal messages lack the weight of premeditated intent. I am a risk analyst. I do not build cases on fragile foundations. I need a legally binding trail. I need them to articulate their crimes in a format that carries administrative weight. I need to shift the negotiation away from Diane and direct it toward my father. Richard spent 30 years working as a regional sales manager for a mid-tier medical supply company. He spent his entire career operating in a world of quotas and leverage. His defining character trait is his ego. He views every interaction as a transaction. He firmly believes he is the smartest negotiator in any room. He loves contracts. He loves the power dynamic of dictating terms. I open a new tab on my laptop. I log into my email client and open a blank draft. I address the message to both of my parents using their primary email accounts. The subject line is simple: Proposed Visitation Agreement. I compose the email using the sterile, detached language of a corporate contract. I know Richard will respond to this tone. It validates his self-image as a shrewd businessman. I begin by outlining a mock schedule for their access to Leo and Maya. I grant them 2 weekend visits a month. I stipulate the hours. I create the illusion that I am actively negotiating the surrender of my boundaries. Then I plant the poison pill. I start a new paragraph and type the following sentences. To ensure we have a clean slate moving forward, I need assurances regarding the recent financial discrepancies. I agree not to pursue legal action regarding the automotive loan and the platinum credit cards recently opened under the Social Security numbers belonging to Leo and Maya. In exchange for my silence, you must guarantee that the anonymous child welfare report is permanently withdrawn and no further government agencies will be sent to my home. I read the draft. It is blunt. It is a direct acknowledgement of the identity theft and the extortion. I press send and close the laptop. Now the hardest part of the operation begins, the waiting. The sun is fully up now. The morning light spills across the kitchen floor. I hear Leo waking up in his bedroom down the hall. I hear Maya asking for her favorite cereal. I transition from the cold, calculating auditor back into a mother. I pour milk into bowls. I tie small shoes. I pack lunches. I drive them to their elementary school and their preschool. I kiss their foreheads and watch them walk through the glass doors. All morning my phone remains silent. All afternoon my inbox remains empty. The silence is a good sign. It means Richard is thinking. It means he took the bait and is currently trying to figure out how to structure his reply to maintain the upper hand. A reckless man would fire back an angry denial. An arrogant salesman will try to close the deal on his own terms. At 4 in the afternoon, I am sitting at my desk, running a vulnerability scan for a corporate client. My personal email application chimes. A new message sits in my inbox. The sender is Richard. I open the email. I read his words and a cold, profound satisfaction settles in my chest. He did not just take the bait. He swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. He wrote a response that essentially negotiates the terms of his own felony. His email begins with a patronizing greeting. He tells me he is glad I am finally acting like a rational adult. Then he proceeds to justify the financial fraud using the exact language I anticipated. He types out these specific sentences. The accounts were a temporary family loan for Brooke. We intended to pay them off before the kids even needed their credit scores. You are overreacting as usual. We agree to the visitation schedule you proposed. Sign the visitation agreement, and we will pay the balances down. Refuse to cooperate, and the caseworker comes back permanently. I stare at the glowing letters on my monitor. The sheer monumental stupidity of his response defies logic. Let us dissect his written confession. First, he acknowledges the existence of the fraudulent accounts. The accounts were a temporary family loan for Brooke. He admits the debt exists. He admits the beneficiary of the stolen funds is my sister. He establishes the motive and the flow of the illicit capital in one sentence. Second, he admits to the unauthorized use of my children's identities. We intended to pay them off before the kids even needed their credit scores. This sentence proves premeditation. It proves he knew exactly whose social security numbers he was exploiting. Third, and most devastatingly, he explicitly connects the financial fraud to the government harassment. Sign the visitation agreement and we will pay the balances down. Refuse to cooperate and the caseworker comes back permanently. This is the holy grail of white-collar prosecution. It is documented, premeditated extortion. He put it in writing using an email server that routes data across federal communication lines. He tied the threat of state intervention directly to his demand for immunity regarding the synthetic identity theft. He thought he was dictating the terms of a family dispute. He did not realize he was drafting his own federal indictment. I do not reply to him. I do not need to. The negotiation is over. I export the entire email thread as a secure digital file. I open a direct communication channel to Detective Reynolds at the Financial Crimes Division. I attach the file. I type a single sentence in the body of the message. We have the confession. I send the transmission. Reynolds replies 12 minutes later. His message is equally brief. Warrants are being drafted. The freeze is initiated. The invisible machinery of the United States banking system locks into place. The process is entirely silent, but it is brutally effective. Federal investigators contact the issuing banks for the Platinum credit cards and the Tier 1 automotive lender in Texas. They flag the accounts tied to Richard and Diane. They flag the receiving accounts associated with Brooke in Los Angeles. Anti-money laundering protocols trigger automatically across the financial sector. The algorithms do not ask for permission. They drop a digital iron curtain over every single asset connected to my parents' names. Their checking accounts turn to ice. Their retirement portfolios are immobilized. Their credit lines are suspended indefinitely. They are currently sitting in their suburban house, entirely oblivious to the fact that they have been severed from the modern economy. They cannot withdraw a $10 bill from a machine. They cannot purchase a tank of gasoline. The illusion of their prosperity is already dead. They just have not noticed the corpse yet. The trap is armed and the timer is counting down. But arresting them quietly in their home on a random Thursday is not enough. They use the threat of public shame to try and control me. They invited my extended family into this dynamic, hoping the pressure of a crowd would force me to surrender. I am going to use their exact strategy against them. Sunday evening is approaching. The dinner reservation at the upscale seafood restaurant in San Francisco is set. Diane has invited my aunts and my uncle to witness my capitulation. She expects a coronation. She expects me to hand over my children and my silence while Brooke flaunts her stolen lifestyle. I begin preparing the physical documents I will carry into that restaurant. The stage is set for a public tribunal. I am simply bringing the executioner's axe. Sunday evening arrives with a thick layer of fog rolling off the San Francisco Bay. The city lights blur into a soft glow against the darkening sky. I pull my car into the valet line at an upscale seafood restaurant situated right on the waterfront. This is not a casual dining establishment. This is a venue featuring white linen tablecloths, crystal water goblets, and menus without prices printed next to the entrees. It is a place designed to project status. It is my parents' favorite place to posture in front of their peers. Diane and Richard cannot actually afford the prices here, but they consider the expense a necessary investment in their public image. Tonight, they chose this specific location for a very strategic reason. They want a home field advantage. They believe the formal setting will intimidate me into compliance. I hand my keys to the valet. I step out into the cool ocean breeze. I am wearing a tailored charcoal suit. My hair is pulled back. I carry a structured leather tote bag over my shoulder. Inside the bag, resting quietly against the lining, are 4 identical blue folders. I walk through the heavy glass doors. The maitre d' leads me toward the back of the main dining room. I spot my family seated at a large round table near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the water. Diane did not just book a table for 4, she invited an audience. Sitting next to my mother are my Aunt Helen, my Aunt Patricia, and my Uncle Robert. These are Diane's siblings. They form the echo chamber of her social circle. They are the Greek chorus of our extended family. Diane summoned them tonight to serve as a public tribunal. She intends to use their collective presence to shame me into signing the agreement. She wants them to watch the rebellious daughter bend the knee to the heartbroken grandmother fighting for access to her grandchildren. I approach the table. The conversation stops. The aunts look up at me with expressions of manufactured pity. Uncle Robert offers a tight, uncomfortable nod. Diane stands up and wraps her arms around me in a performative embrace. Her perfume is stifling. She pats my back and tells me how glad she is that I decided to be reasonable. I take my seat. I do not order wine. I ask the waiter for a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lemon. I keep my posture relaxed and my hands resting gently on the table. We wait for the final guest. Brooke arrives 20 minutes late. She makes an entrance designed to pull every eye in the room toward her. She wears a structured designer jacket that retails for more than $2,000. Her hair is perfectly styled. She walks with the unearned confidence of someone who has never received a bill she actually had to pay. She reaches our table and greets the aunts with loud, enthusiastic hugs. She drops her leather handbag onto an empty chair. Then she reaches into her pocket and tosses her keys directly onto the center of the white tablecloth. The heavy silver key fob lands with a dull thud next to the breadbasket. The iconic 3-pointed star of the Mercedes-Benz logo catches the light from the chandelier overhead. I look at those keys. To the rest of the table, they are a symbol of Brooke's imaginary success. To me, they are a physical manifestation of a $65,000 felony committed against a 6-year-old boy. My son is financing the piece of metal resting next to the butter dish. Brooke finally acknowledges me. She offers a brief dismissive wave. She complains to the table about the traffic on the bridge and how the valet attendant did not open her door fast enough. The aunts nod sympathetically. Diane reaches over and squeezes Brooke's hand, telling her how proud she is of her busy schedule. They are all so comfortable. They are so deeply entrenched in their illusion of superiority. I sit quietly and sip my sparkling water. I watch the dynamics play out. Richard is leaning back in his chair, holding a menu like a shield. He wears the smug, satisfied expression of a salesman who just closed a hostile negotiation. He thinks his email exchange secured his victory. He thinks he outsmarted the system. He has no idea his legitimate bank accounts turned to solid ice on Friday afternoon, and he is currently sitting in an expensive restaurant with a frozen wallet. The aunts and the uncles spend the first course exchanging pleasantries. They talk about upcoming holiday plans and golf tournaments, but the underlying tension is thick. Everyone knows why we are here. They are just waiting for Diane to deliver her opening monologue. If you are listening to my story right now, I want you to remember a crucial fact about toxic people. They only feel safe when they control the narrative. They use public spaces and extended family members as weapons of compliance. They rely on your desire to avoid a scene. They bet their entire strategy on the assumption that you will stay quiet to keep the peace. They write a script where they are the victims and you are the villain, and they expect you to read your lines without arguing. For 32 years, I read the lines they gave me. I played the invisible daughter. I subsidized the golden child. I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. Today I am taking the pen. I am rewriting the end of their story. The waiter clears the appetizer plates. The ambient noise of the restaurant provides a steady hum in the background. Diane sighs. It is a long, theatrical breath designed to pull the attention of the table back to her. She places her napkin in her lap and looks at me with sorrowful eyes. Everly. She begins, her voice pitched low enough to sound intimate, but loud enough for the aunts to hear every syllable. We are so glad you are here. This week has been incredibly painful for your father and me. We just want our family to be whole again. We miss Leo and Maya terribly. Aunt Helen murmurs her agreement. Aunt Patricia looks at me with a soft, pleading expression. They do not know about the identity theft. They do not know about the fraudulent credit cards. Diane told them a sanitized, fabricated version of the truth. She told them I suffered a mental breakdown and locked them out of my house for no reason. She told them she had to call the state welfare agency out of pure maternal terror. Brooke rolls her eyes and picks up her water glass. Just sign the paper, Everly, she says. Her tone is laced with irritation. Stop making everything so difficult for Mom and Dad. You are always so dramatic. Richard sits forward. He reaches into the breast pocket of his suit jacket. He pulls out a folded piece of paper and a heavy silver fountain pen. He smooths the paper out and slides it across the white tablecloth, stopping right in front of my plate. It is the handwritten visitation agreement. It outlines their guaranteed access to my children. At the bottom of the page, there is a blank line waiting for my signature. Sign it, Richard says. His voice carries the firm, authoritative tone he used to close medical supply deals. Let us put this ugly misunderstanding behind us and move forward. We agreed on the terms. You drop your baseless complaints, and we pretend this week never happened. I look down at the piece of paper. It is the physical embodiment of their extortion. They expect me to pick up the silver pen. They expect me to shrink under the judgmental gaze of the aunts and the uncle. They expect me to trade the financial futures of my children for a quiet dinner in San Francisco. I do not touch the pen. I do not reach for the paper. I reach down to the floor beside my chair. I open the brass latch of my structured leather tote bag. My fingers wrap around the smooth plastic covers of the blue folders. The trap is perfectly set. The audience is watching. The performance is about to begin. The digital clock on my dashboard reads 2 a.m. The suburban streets of Northern California are dark and empty. I drive past rows of manicured lawns and sleeping houses. The blue binder rests on the passenger seat next to me. I do not call my parents. I do not send an angry text message demanding an explanation. When you are dealing with predators, you never announce your next move. A confrontation only gives guilty people the timeline they need to shred documents and coordinate their alibis. I am not giving them a single second to prepare. I pull into the visitor parking lot of the local police precinct. I walk through the sliding glass doors into the brightly lit lobby. The fluorescent lights hum overhead. A desk sergeant looks up from his computer monitor. I do not ask to file a standard police report. I ask for the division that handles white-collar financial crimes. I request a detective who specializes in identity theft and wire fraud. The sergeant tells me to take a seat. 30 minutes later, a man in a rumpled gray suit walks into the lobby. He introduces himself as Detective Reynolds. He looks tired. He holds a notepad and a pen, assuming I am here to report a stolen credit card or a phishing email scam. He leads me down a quiet hallway into a small interview room. The walls are bare. A single metal table sits in the center. I place the thick blue binder on the table. I slide it across the metal surface. I tell him my 4-year-old daughter and my 6-year-old son are the victims of a sophisticated synthetic identity theft ring. I tell him the perpetrators are my own parents. Reynolds opens the plastic cover. He pulls out a pen and begins to read. I sit in silence and watch his posture shift. He stops leaning back in his chair. He sits up straight. He turns the first page, then the second, then the third. He traces his finger over the printed email threads where my father explicitly outlines the credit hack to my sister. He examines the internet protocol logs I extracted from the lending platforms. He studies the signature documents from the Beverly Hills luxury car dealership. I explain the architecture of the fraud. I walk him through the process of splicing an unmonitored social security number with an established credit profile. I show him the transaction ledgers proving the illicit funds bypassed my parents' bank accounts and flowed directly into the property management firm in Los Angeles. Reynolds looks up from the paperwork. He closes the binder. He asks me who compiled this dossier. I tell him I am a cybersecurity risk analyst. He sets his pen down and says, I just handed him a closed case. He explains the legal reality of what my parents have done. This is no longer a simple local jurisdiction issue. My father bypassed corporate underwriting algorithms using the identity of a minor. The Tier 1 automotive lender he defrauded is headquartered in Texas. The platinum credit cards belong to a financial institution based in Delaware. Every time my father clicked submit on an application, the data packets crossed state lines. Routing illicit digital funds across federal jurisdictions triggers a federal inquiry. The local precinct will not handle the prosecution. The United States Department of Justice handles this level of wire fraud. The penalties are severe. The prison sentences are mandatory. But having the financial documents is only half the battle. I look Reynolds in the eye. I tell him I want them prosecuted for the extortion. I tell him about the visit from the State Child Welfare Agency. I show him the text message currently sitting unread on my phone. The message from Diane demanding physical access to my children, or else things will get more complicated. Reynolds reads the threat. He nods slowly. He tells me the federal prosecutors will want undeniable proof that Diane and Richard are actively leveraging the false government report to cover their financial tracks. A vague text message is a good start, but it leaves room for a defense attorney to claim a simple misunderstanding. We need them to articulate their demands clearly. We need them to put the extortion in writing. We need them to explicitly tie the harassment to a financial arrangement. We establish a strict timeline. The federal authorities need a few days to process the evidence and secure the warrants for the electronic devices in my parents' home. During that window, I have to play the role of the terrified victim. I have to draw them out. I leave the precinct as the sun begins to rise over the hills. The sky turns a pale gray. I drive back to my quiet house. I unlock the new deadbolts. I walk into my kitchen and sit at the granite island. The house is still silent. My children are still sleeping safely in their beds. I pick up my phone. I stare at the message from my mother. Diane thrives on submission. When I was a teenager, she would punish me with days of silent treatment over perceived slights until I broke down and wrote her an apology letter. She needs to feel powerful. She views every relationship as a hierarchy where she sits at the top. If I fight back, she will raise her shields and become cautious. But if I surrender, she will become sloppy. I am going to give her exactly what she craves. I open the text thread. I begin to type. Every word is carefully selected to stroke her ego and feed her arrogance. I play the part of the defeated, exhausted mother who has finally realized she cannot win a war against her own family. You win. I type the 2 words that will seal her fate. I add a space and continue the performance. I do not want to lose the kids. Let us meet for dinner on Sunday to discuss an arrangement and the financial help you asked for. I read the message twice. It hits all the psychological triggers. It concedes defeat. It references the children, confirming her leverage worked. It suggests a physical meeting, giving her the illusion of control. And most importantly, it brings up the topic of money, opening the door for her to confess her financial demands. I press send. The text bubble turns blue. The bait is in the water. I set the phone face down on the counter. My parents are sitting in their suburban house, blinded by their own unearned confidence. They think they have outsmarted the system. They think they have broken my spirit. They are swimming straight toward the hook. Now I just need them to bite down hard enough to leave a permanent mark. The sound of the plastic folder covers flipping open cuts through the ambient noise of the restaurant. 3 distinct snaps. Aunt Helen, Aunt Patricia, and Uncle Robert look down at the documents resting on their laps. The first page in each binder is a direct printout from the Federal Credit Bureau. I watch their eyes track across the black text. I watch the precise moment their brains struggle to process the data they are seeing. It takes a few seconds. The human mind is designed to reject information that contradicts its established reality. They came here to stage an intervention for a daughter who lost her grip on sanity. They are looking at a financial statement belonging to a child who just learned how to tie his shoes. Aunt Helen traces the letters of Leo's name at the top of the page. She looks at the date of birth. Then her eyes slide to the right side of the column where the outstanding balances are listed in bold font. The color drains from her cheeks, leaving her pale and silent. Uncle Robert is a practical man. He spent his life running a regional logistics company. He reads contracts and balance sheets every day. He understands the architecture of debt. He flips past the summary page and looks at the origination documents. He sees the signature lines. He recognizes his brother-in-law's handwriting spliced next to digital authorizations. Robert lowers the folder. He takes off his reading glasses and places them on the white tablecloth. He looks at my father. "What is this, Richard?" He does not ask it with a raised voice. He asks it with the quiet, tight tone of a man who just discovered a snake under his dining chair. Richard opens his mouth. The retired salesman searches for a pitch. He searches for a smooth deflection to laugh off the tension and redirect the conversation. He finds nothing. His jaw works, but no sound comes out. He looks at the documents in his brother's hands and realizes his email strategy failed. He is not in a private negotiation anymore. He is standing under a spotlight. I do not let Richard find his voice. I fill the silence. I speak with the same measured, clinical cadence I use when delivering a vulnerability report to a corporate board of directors. "That is a federal credit report, Uncle Robert," I say. "It details the current financial standing of your 6-year-old great-nephew and your 4-year-old great-niece. You are holding proof of synthetic identity theft." Aunt Patricia drops her folder. It lands on the edge of her plate with a sharp clatter, causing her silverware to rattle. Several patrons at the adjacent tables turn their heads toward us. I continue presenting the data to the tribunal. I do not rush. I let every number sink into the fabric of the evening. Leo currently holds an auto loan that is 90 days past due. The principal balance is $65,000. The lender is preparing for asset recovery. Maya holds 3 platinum credit cards. Every single line of credit is maxed out. She carries $30,000 in revolving debt at a penalty interest rate. Their social security numbers were stolen to bypass commercial underwriting algorithms. Diane breaks. The polished suburban facade shatters into pure, unadulterated panic. She realizes the narrative is slipping through her fingers. She realizes her sisters are reading the physical proof of her crimes. She reaches across the table. Her manicured nails scratch against the linen cloth as she tries to snatch the blue folder out of Helen's hands. "It is a misunderstanding," Diane hisses. Her voice is shrill and frantic. She is lying, Helen. Beverly fabricated these papers. She works with computers. She printed fake documents to hurt us because she is sick. We only called the caseworker to get her help. Helen does not hand the folder over. She pulls it back, pulling it out of Diane's reach. It is a subtle physical rejection, but it carries the weight of a guilty verdict. Helen looks at the internet protocol logs. She looks at the private mailbox registration bearing the misspelled version of Diane's maiden name. I do not argue with my mother. I do not defend the authenticity of my evidence. When you hold the winning hand, you do not need to shout across the table. You just show your cards. I turn my attention away from the Greek chorus and focus on the golden child. Brooke has been sitting in silence since the folders were distributed. She is staring at the printed pages in Uncle Robert's hands. She is trying to calculate her own exposure. She is trying to figure out if she can play the naive victim. I raise my hand and point directly to the center of the table. I point to the heavy silver key fob resting next to the breadbasket. The keys Brooke tossed onto the linen with such practiced arrogance 20 minutes ago. My 6-year-old son is currently financing that car, Brooke. The words drop into the center of the table like stones into a quiet pond. The ripples are instantaneous. Brooke freezes. Her mouth opens in a silent gasp. The color washes out of her face, leaving her looking hollow and terrified. She looks at the keys. She looks at the aunts who are now staring at her with wide, horrified eyes. Brooke knows the truth. She read the email from Richard outlining the credit hack. She knew the origin of the funds. But she never expected the origin to be exposed in a crowded seafood restaurant surrounded by the relatives who spent years praising her success. She built her entire identity on being the envy of the family. Uncle Robert follows my pointing finger. He looks at the Mercedes emblem on the keys. He looks back at the origination documents in the blue folder. He sees the name of the Beverly Hills luxury import dealership matching the make and model. The final piece of the puzzle locks into place for the extended family. They realize they are not sitting at a table with a heartbroken grandmother and a troubled daughter. They realize they were summoned to participate in a public shaming by 2 felons and their complicit beneficiary. They realize the expensive suits, the designer jackets, and the luxury vehicles were purchased with the stolen futures of a first grader and a preschooler. The shift in the atmosphere is palpable. The manufactured pity the aunts directed at me 10 minutes ago mutates into sheer revulsion. They look at Diane and Richard the way you look at a stranger who just committed a crime on a public street. Diane built her entire existence around her social standing. She attended the charity galas. She hosted the holiday dinners. She judged her neighbors on their perceived moral failings and their financial missteps. She treated her reputation as a shield that made her untouchable. I watched that reputation evaporate in the span of 3 minutes. It turns to ash right in front of her eyes. The sisters she relied on to validate her superiority are recoiling from her physical presence. The brother-in-law she tried to impress is staring at her husband with undisguised disgust. Diane looks at the faces of her siblings. She sees the judgment, the definitive, permanent judgment that cannot be spun or minimized with a polite smile. She opens her mouth to launch another defense to spin another web of excuses, but she does not get the chance. Because Brooke realizes the ship is taking on water, and the golden child has no intention of going down with the captain. Brooke realizes the narrative is collapsing. She feels the collective gaze of the extended family burning into her skin. The aunts are no longer looking at her with admiration. They are looking at her the way you look at a parasite. Brooke has spent 28 years cultivating an image of effortless grace and unearned privilege. She cannot process the reality of being viewed as a criminal. Her survival instinct kicks in. To understand my sister, you have to understand her lifelong relationship with accountability. Deflection is her reflex. When we were children, she would break a vase in the living room and immediately point her finger at the family dog. When she failed college courses, she blamed the professors for designing unfair exams. Our parents always accepted her version of events. They shielded her from the consequences of her own actions. Brooke assumes that same strategy will save her now. She assumes tears will activate the sympathy of the tribunal. She pushes her chair back from the table. The wooden legs scrape harshly against the floorboards. She brings her hands to her face. She forces a sob, letting her expensive mascara run down her cheeks in dark, jagged lines. "I did not know." Brooke cries out, her voice pitched high and trembling. She points a manicured finger directly across the white tablecloth at Richard. "Dad told me he used his own credit history to get the approvals. He told me he was co-signing the leases to help me build my portfolio. I thought he was just being a supportive father. I am a victim here." She plays the part beautifully. She portrays the betrayed innocent daughter caught in the crossfire of a desperate parent's bad choices. If I were a normal sibling, I might be stunned by the sheer speed of her betrayal. She threw the man who funded her entire existence under the proverbial bus without a second thought. But I am not stunned. I am a risk analyst. I study the behavioral patterns of compromised targets. When a threat actor is cornered, they always try to sever ties with their accomplices to save themselves. I anticipated this exact maneuver before I even walked into the restaurant. I do not let her rewrite history. I reach into my structured tote bag one last time. I do not pull out a folder. I pull out a single sheet of printed paper. It is a standalone document. I highlighted a specific paragraph in bright yellow ink. I slide the paper across the linen. It stops right in front of Aunt Helen. "Read the highlighted section, Helen." I instruct, keeping my tone perfectly level. Helen picks up the paper. Her hands are shaking. She adjusts her reading glasses and looks at the text. It is the email exchange from 4 months ago, the digital conversation where Richard laid out the blueprint for the fraud. Helen clears her throat. She reads Brooke's own words aloud to the table. The words echo over the sound of the dining room. "Are you sure the hack will clear in time?" Helen reads her voice wavering. "Just make sure you use Maya's clean slate to get the secondary line approved before my weekend trip. I cannot lose the penthouse." Brooke's mouth snaps shut. Her theatrical sobbing stops instantly. The lie dies right in her throat. She stares at the piece of paper in Helen's hands. There is no plausible deniability. There is no room for interpretation. She typed the name of her 4-year-old niece. She acknowledged the clean slate. She ordered her father to execute the theft to maintain her luxury lease. She looks at Richard, expecting him to fall on his sword. She expects him to concoct a lie to protect her image. But Richard is a cornered animal. He just watched his reputation disintegrate in front of his brother-in-law. He is staring at the prospect of federal prison, and the daughter he committed felonies to protect just tried to hand him over to the wolves to save her own skin. The loyalty among thieves evaporates. Richard turns his rage onto his favorite child. "You ungrateful, spoiled brat!" Richard yells. He slams his hand down on the table, causing the water goblets to tremble. "I drain my retirement accounts to keep you in designer clothes. I ruin my own credit to pay for your vacations. I put my name on the line to get you that car, and you sit here and call yourself a victim. You begged me for the money. You told me to fix it." He is shouting now. He is admitting his crimes in front of the entire table just to prove how much he sacrificed for her. He validates the contents of the blue folders with his own outburst. The ecosystem they built is devouring itself. The toxic dynamic is imploding in real time. Diane cannot handle the noise. She cannot handle the exposure. Her country club aesthetic is dissolving into a cheap public brawl. Patrons at other tables have stopped eating. They are turning in their chairs to watch the spectacle. The maitre d' is hovering near the edge of the dining room, holding a radio, speaking quietly to the restaurant manager. Diane stands up. She abandons all pretense of elegance. She lunges across the table, reaching for the blue folders resting near Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia. She acts on pure irrational instinct, believing that if she destroys the physical paper, the truth will magically disappear. "Give them to me," Diane hisses, clawing at the plastic covers. "This is private family business. You have no right to look at our finances." Patricia pulls her folder out of reach. She looks at her sister with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Diane knocks over her own wine glass in the struggle. A dark red stain spreads across the pristine white tablecloth, soaking into the fabric and pooling near the silver keys of the Mercedes. It is a pathetic display. A woman wearing pearls and a silk blouse wrestling for printed emails in a high-end seafood restaurant. They are eating each other alive. The foundation of lies and entitlement they spent decades constructing has crumbled underneath their feet. They have no script left to read. They have no leverage left to pull. I do not need to participate in the carnage. The execution is complete. I push my chair back. I stand up from the table. I smooth the front of my charcoal jacket and adjust the strap of my tote bag on my shoulder. My movement catches Diane's attention. She stops wrestling for the documents. She stands up straight, breathing heavily, her hair falling out of its perfect styling. She looks across the ruined table at me. She expects me to gloat. She expects me to raise my voice and declare victory. She still thinks this is a family dispute that can be won or lost with the final word. I look down at the woman who gave birth to me. I keep my voice calm, ensuring every syllable cuts through the lingering tension in the air. You said you wanted what was best for your grandchildren. I tell her, echoing the exact phrase she used in her extortion text. So did I. That is why I called the police. I do not wait for her response. I turn my back on the table and begin to walk toward the exit. But my departure is not the end of the evening. It is merely the cue for the final act to begin. I turn my back on the ruined white tablecloth and begin walking toward the exit. I keep my pace steady and measured. I do not rush. Behind me, I hear the harsh scrape of wood against the polished floorboards. Richard cannot accept being dismissed. His entire identity relies on his perceived authority over his children. He views my departure as a direct challenge to his dominance. He pushes his chair back and lunges forward, intending to grab my shoulder. He wants to physically stop me and enforce his control in front of his brother-in-law. He does not make it to the front door. He does not even take 4 steps. Before his hand can reach my jacket, the heavy glass doors of the restaurant swing inward. The cool ocean fog drifts into the warm lobby. 3 men step across the threshold. 2 of them wear the dark navy uniforms and tactical belts of the San Francisco Police Department. The 3rd man wears a rumpled gray suit. It is Detective Reynolds from the Financial Crimes Division. The ambient hum of the dining room dies instantly. The clinking of silverware against fine china stops. The soft jazz music playing from the ceiling speakers seems to fade into nothing. Every patron in the establishment turns their head to watch the officers walk down the center aisle. The contrast between the elegant crystal chandeliers and the metal badges creates a jarring shift in the atmosphere. I step aside and pause near the host stand. I watch Reynolds bypass the other tables and walk directly toward my family. Richard freezes in his tracks. His hand drops to his side. The blustering retired salesman who just spent 20 minutes trying to dictate the terms of my surrender suddenly looks very small. He realizes the men in uniform are not here for a random disturbance. They are walking straight toward him. As the officers close the distance, I watch the architecture of my parents' lives collapse. I know something they do not know yet. I know about the invisible hammer. When a federal agency targets an individual for wire fraud and synthetic identity theft, they do not politely ask the suspect to halt their spending. They do not send a warning letter in the mail. They mandate a digital quarantine. At 5 in the afternoon on Friday, the banking algorithms executed a coordinated strike. The process is entirely silent, but it is brutally effective. Every legitimate checking account tied to Diane and Richard was immobilized. Their retirement portfolios were locked. Their credit limits were reduced to 0. They are currently standing in an upscale seafood restaurant, believing they still possess the wealth to negotiate their way out of a problem. They do not realize their mortgage payment will bounce next week. They do not realize their debit cards will return error codes if they try to buy a cup of coffee tomorrow morning. They cannot hire a high-priced defense attorney because they cannot access a single dollar of their own capital. They are entirely destitute, and they have no idea. Reynolds stops in front of my father. He does not lower his voice to protect the privacy of the table. He speaks with the practiced volume of a man delivering legal facts. He addresses Richard by his full legal name. He states that he holds active warrants for his arrest. The charges hang in the air: wire fraud, mail fraud, aggravated identity theft. Reynolds explains that because Richard used the Postal Service to receive the platinum credit cards and digital wire transfers to route the stolen funds across state lines, the crimes fall under federal jurisdiction. This is not a local dispute over a borrowed lawnmower. This is a federal indictment. Diane lets out a sharp, breathless gasp. She stumbles backward, bumping into the edge of the table. She looks around the room. She sees Aunt Helen and Aunt Patricia watching her in horrified silence. She sees the wealthy patrons at the adjacent tables whispering behind their hands. The social standing she valued above her own bloodline is gone forever. Her country club aesthetic is replaced by the grim reality of public humiliation. The uniformed officers step forward. They instruct Richard to turn around and place his hands behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoes clearly in the quiet dining room. The sound is sharp and definitive. It is the sound of a consequence finally arriving after 32 years of delay. The officer begins to recite the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. It is a deeply ironic statement. My parents spent decades demanding my silence to protect their secrets. Now the state is demanding theirs. A second officer approaches Diane. He asks her to place her hands behind her back. She begins to weep. It is not the theatrical sobbing she used earlier to manipulate her sisters. It is the raw, unfiltered crying of a woman who realizes her armor has been stripped away. The handcuffs lock around her wrists, wrinkling the sleeves of her expensive silk blouse. While the officers secure my parents, the golden child evaluates her own exposure. Brooke does not rush to comfort her weeping mother. She does not offer to call a lawyer for her handcuffed father. Her survival instinct overrides her familial loyalty. She sees the attention focused on the arrests, and she searches for an exit. She reaches for her designer jacket draped over the back of her chair. She grabs her leather handbag. She turns away from the table and takes a slow, quiet step toward the side door leading to the outdoor patio. She intends to slip out into the fog. She wants to distance herself from the wreckage and return to her luxury penthouse in Los Angeles. She thinks she can abandon the people who funded her entire existence and simply walk away from the blast zone. She does not make it to the brass handle of the patio door. Detective Reynolds anticipates the maneuver. He steps into her path, blocking the exit. He looks at her with a cold, indifferent expression. He does not read her Miranda rights today. Her accessory charges will come later as the prosecutors unravel the depth of her complicity. Today he is here to reclaim the stolen property. Reynolds holds out his hand and presents a separate piece of paper. It is a federal asset seizure warrant. He addresses Brooke directly and demands the keys to the pearl-white Mercedes currently parked in the valet lot. Brooke stares at the warrant. Her eyes widen in disbelief. Her fabricated Instagram reality is crashing down in front of a live audience. The luxury car she used to project an image of effortless wealth was financed by the stolen identity of a 6-year-old boy. The government is executing a repossession right here in the dining room. She tries to argue. She claims the vehicle belongs to her. She insists she needs it to drive home to Southern California. Her voice pitches higher, taking on the petulant tone she used to manipulate our parents. Reynolds does not negotiate. He tells her she can surrender the keys voluntarily, or the officers will impound the vehicle by force and charge her with obstruction of justice. He points out that the true owner of the vehicle is the bank, and the bank has requested immediate recovery due to fraudulent origination. Brooke realizes she has no leverage. The charm and entitlement that carried her through 28 years of life hold no currency with a federal investigator. She looks back at the table. The silver key fob is still resting next to the spilled red wine. She walks back to the table with trembling hands. The aunts watch her with expressions of deep disgust. Brooke picks up the keys and hands them to the detective. Her lips are trembling. Her shoulders slump. She is reduced to a pedestrian standing in a restaurant she can no longer afford to eat in. I step out the front doors of the restaurant and walk over to the valet stand. The night air is cold and sharp. I stand under the canvas awning and look back through the large glass windows. I watch the officers escort my parents through the center aisle of the dining room. I watch the red and blue lights from the police cruisers parked on the curb reflect off the crystal chandeliers inside. The execution is flawless. The threat has been neutralized. I watch the doors slide open as they walk outside. I prepare to get into my car and drive away. But a shattered ego always looks for one final target. I stand beneath the canvas awning of the valet station. The damp San Francisco fog clings to the fabric of my charcoal suit. The street is bathed in the rhythmic rotation of red and blue emergency lights. The valets in their uniform vests stand perfectly still. They hold the keys to luxury sedans, but they are currently watching a scene money usually keeps hidden behind closed doors. The heavy glass doors of the restaurant slide open. The officers lead my father out first. Richard walks with his head down. The blustering salesman who demanded respect his entire life cannot even look the parking attendants in the eye. His suit jacket bunches awkwardly around the steel cuffs, locking his wrists behind his back. The bravado is gone. He is just an aging man, calculating the exact moment his life fell apart. The officer places a hand on the top of his head, guiding him into the back seat of the cruiser. The heavy door slams shut with a definitive metallic thud, sealing him inside a cage of his own making. Then comes my mother. Diane resists the gentle forward pressure from the officer guiding her. She twists her shoulders, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity while wearing a stained silk blouse. She looks back toward the restaurant, hoping to see her sisters, or perhaps her golden child, rushing to her defense. But Brooke remains inside, dealing with the federal asset seizure of her vehicle. The aunts remain at the table, distancing themselves from the wreckage. Diane is entirely alone. Her eyes scan the sidewalk and she spots me. I am standing near the front bumper of my sedan. I am not hiding. I am waiting for the attendant to process my ticket. Diane stops walking. The officer nudges her forward, but she plants her heels on the damp concrete. She looks at me through the mist. The panic in her eyes shifts. When a manipulator realizes their authority is broken and their threats carry no weight, they reach for the oldest tool in their arsenal. They reach for guilt. Diane tries to leverage the biological connection she spent 3 decades exploiting. She projects her voice over the hum of the idling engines. Everly, she cries out. The pitch is high and wavering, engineered to sound like a wounded bird. How could you do this to your own family? Let us examine that sentence. It is a fascinating psychological construct. Notice the phrasing. How could you do this? She assigns the blame for her current situation entirely to my reaction. She ignores the financial crimes. She ignores the stolen $65,000 auto loan. She ignores the maxed-out platinum credit cards and the false government report she filed against a mother. In her mind, the crime is not the theft. The crime is the fact that I refuse to stay quiet and endure it. She views accountability as an attack. She expects the word family to function as a trigger. A year ago, that word would have worked. A year ago, hearing my mother cry out to me on a public street would have caused my chest to tighten. The old version of me would have felt a hollow ache. I would have questioned my own sanity, wondering if I went too far by calling the authorities. I would have stepped forward and offered to pay for a defense attorney just to stop her tears. I would have accepted the blame just to restore the peace. But the old version of me does not exist anymore. I listen to her voice echoing off the brick facade of the restaurant. I search my body for a trace of anger. I look for regret. I find nothing. There is no adrenaline spike. There is no lingering fear. I feel an unshakable, profound peace. The trauma bond that held me captive for 32 years is dead. It was incinerated by the very flames she tried to use to burn my life down. I do not step forward. I do not raise my voice to match her hysteria. I look at the woman standing next to the police cruiser and I deliver the final assessment. I speak the truth with the clinical detachment of a professional closing a file. You are not my family, Diane, I tell her. My voice carries through the damp air, reaching her ears with perfect clarity. You are just a liability. In the corporate risk sector, a liability is a toxic asset. It is a vulnerability that threatens the structural integrity of the entire system. You do not negotiate with a liability. You do not try to rehabilitate it. You excise it. You sever the connection and you fortify the firewall. Diane is no longer a mother. She is a neutralized threat. The words land exactly as intended. Diane stops struggling. The feigned sorrow vanishes, replaced by a stark, silent realization that her daughter is gone. The officer uses the moment of compliance to guide her into the second vehicle. She ducks her head and slides into the plastic seat. Another door shuts. Another cage is sealed. I turn away. The valet attendant steps forward. He hands me my keys with a cautious, respectful nod. I slide into the driver's seat of my car. I pull the heavy door shut. The thick glass seals out the noise of the street. The flashing emergency lights become muted, silent flashes in the darkness. I start the engine. The dashboard illuminates with a warm, steady glow. I pull out of the parking lot and merge onto the quiet coastal highway. The tires hum against the wet asphalt. I do not adjust the rearview mirror to watch the cruisers drive away. Looking back implies a lingering attachment. Looking back suggests there is something left to learn from the past. I keep my eyes focused entirely on the road ahead. The legal and emotional severance is complete. The drive back to the suburbs is a masterclass in tranquility. I do not turn on the radio. I do not replay the events of the evening in my head. I let the silence fill the cabin of the vehicle. I think about my house waiting for me at the end of the route. I think about the new deadbolts on the doors and the upgraded security perimeter. I think about my son and my daughter sleeping securely in their beds, protected from the predators who happen to share their bloodline. For the first time in my life, I am not carrying the weight of my parents' expectations. I am not plotting how to cover Brooke's next financial disaster. I am holding the steering wheel with a lightness I have never known. I excise the tumor and the remaining tissue is healthy. But the machinery I set in motion at the restaurant is far from finished. The arrests on a foggy Sunday night are only the initial shockwave. The true devastation of a federal indictment does not happen while wearing handcuffs in a public setting. The real destruction happens in the slow, methodical unraveling of everything the criminals spent their lives trying to protect. My parents built their entire reality on a foundation of borrowed capital and stolen identities. The government is about to systematically dismantle that foundation brick by brick. The frozen accounts are just the beginning. I know the exact sequence of events that will follow. I know the prosecutors will not offer leniency to defendants who target minors. I know the civil penalties will drain whatever legitimate equity remains in their suburban estate. They are going to lose the house they used to host their holiday gatherings. They are going to lose the social standing they valued above their own grandchildren. And Brooke is about to discover what happens when a golden child is forced to survive in an ecosystem where the bank of mom and dad is permanently closed by the Department of Justice. Stripped of her least luxury and her unearned allowance, she will have to face the terrifying prospect of sustaining herself. The fallout is going to reshape the landscape of all their lives, and the ruin will be monumental. I am ready to watch the dominoes fall from a safe, comfortable distance. The wheels of the federal justice system do not turn with the swift, dramatic flair you see on television programs. They turn with the slow, grinding efficiency of a glacier. Once the United States Department of Justice takes possession of a white-collar financial crime, they build an airtight container around the defendants. My parents did not get a cinematic courtroom trial. They got a sterile conference room and a public defender who looked at my blue binder and told them their only viable option was a plea agreement. Federal prosecutors do not negotiate out of pity. They negotiate for efficiency. They had the digital footprints. They had the forged signatures from the Beverly Hills dealership. Most importantly, they had the printed email thread where Richard explicitly outlined the extortion and the identity theft. Faced with the undeniable reality of decades in a federal penitentiary, Diane and Richard signed the plea deal. The terms were engineered to strip them of the only currency they ever truly valued. They avoided maximum prison sentences, but they received 5 years of strict federal probation. The true punishment, however, was the financial restitution. The court ordered them to repay every stolen dollar to the issuing banks and the automotive lender. To satisfy the 6-figure debt, the government initiated the forced liquidation of their assets. The suburban house where I grew up, the property Diane treated as her ultimate status symbol, went up for public auction. The bank foreclosed on the pristine lawn and the custom kitchen. I did not attend the estate sale, but my cousin told me the details. The neighbors Diane spent years trying to impress walked through her living room, buying her imported crystal glasses and her designer furniture for pennies on the dollar. The facade she guarded with her life was picked apart by bargain hunters on a Saturday morning. Today, my parents live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in an outdated complex near a busy industrial park. They share a single reliable compact car. Richard spends his days searching for entry-level clerical work to satisfy his probation requirements. Diane can no longer afford her salon appointments or her country club dues. They are required to submit their monthly budgets to a federal probation officer. They are exiles living in the shadows of the wealthy suburbs they once ruled. They became ghosts in their own lives. The fallout for the golden child was equally poetic. Brooke tried to maintain her innocence. She hired a defense attorney using the last of her available credit. She claimed she was a naive victim of our father's manipulation. But the federal investigator simply placed a printout of her own email on the table. The email where she specifically instructed Richard to use her 4-year-old niece's clean slate to secure the vehicle. Ignorance is a defense. Ordering a crime in writing is a conspiracy. Brooke faced accessory charges for her role in the wire fraud. She avoided jail time as a first-time offender, but the court levied heavy fines and mandated community service. With her criminal record public and her stolen luxury vehicle repossessed by the bank, her fabricated lifestyle evaporated. She was forced to declare personal bankruptcy. The property management company in Los Angeles evicted her from the penthouse. Stripped of her leased luxury and cut off from the bank of mom and dad, Brooke had to enter the real world. She moved into a tiny studio apartment in the valley. To survive, she had to secure a minimum wage job. My sister, the woman who spent her 20s curating a flawless social media aesthetic and mocking people who work traditional hours, now wears a polyester uniform. She works as a retail associate at a mid-tier department store in a suburban shopping mall. She spends 8 hours a day standing on her feet folding discounted sweaters and organizing clearance racks. She wears a plastic name tag. She spends her shifts assisting entitled customers who speak to her with the exact same dismissive arrogance she used to direct at the rest of the world. The mathematics of minimum wage are a brutal teacher, and Brooke is finally learning the lesson. While their world dissolved into ash, my world expanded. The first step was securing my perimeter permanently. The child welfare case my mother opened against me did not just fade away. I petitioned the state and presented the findings of the federal financial investigation. The family court judge reviewed the evidence of the extortion. The judge did not just close the case, he officially expunged the record, ensuring the false allegations could never be used against me in the future. I took the federal convictions and filed for a permanent restraining order. The court granted it without hesitation. Diane, Richard, and Brooke are legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me, Leo, or Maya. If they attempt to send an email, make a phone call, or arrive at my property, they will be arrested immediately for violating a court order. My children are shielded by an impenetrable legal firewall. To ensure their financial futures are never compromised again, I hired a premier wealth management firm. I established an irrevocable trust for Leo and Maya. I locked their social security numbers behind a highly restricted PIN code system. No one can ever open a line of credit in their names again. The corporate world operates on a very distinct logic. Chief executive officers do not care about suburban gossip. They care about risk mitigation. They care about executives who can handle high-pressure crises with clinical detachment. Word of my situation reached the upper management of the cybersecurity firm where I work. The details of the family drama were kept quiet, but the methodology I used was highly respected. The board of directors reviewed how I audited a sophisticated synthetic identity theft ring, traced the digital footprints across state lines, and orchestrated a seamless sting operation with federal authorities without ever compromising my daily work output. They realized that an analyst who can clinically dismantle her own corrupt relatives will show zero mercy to a corporate hacker. 3 months after the arrests, I was called into the corner office. The chief executive officer handed me a new contract. I was promoted to the role of Senior Director of Risk Mitigation. I now oversee an entire division of analysts. My salary doubled. The career I built in the shadows, the stable life my parents viewed as boring, became the foundation of an industry empire. I spend my weekends taking Leo and Maya to the beach. We build sandcastles. We eat ice cream on the boardwalk. My home is quiet and filled with laughter. I do not look over my shoulder. I do not answer phone calls from unknown numbers. The anxiety that defined my first 32 years is entirely gone. If you are listening to this story, you might think this is the end. You might look at the tidy conclusion, the federal convictions, the promotions, and the boundaries, and assume the narrative is complete. You might also think I got incredibly lucky. You might look back at the very beginning of this saga and wonder about the timing. You might wonder how a state child welfare caseworker arrived at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, looked around my house for 45 minutes, and simply walked away. You might ask yourself why a government employee, tasked with investigating a serious allegation of child neglect, would close her folder, smile at a mother she just met, and say, "Your home is wonderful." State agencies are notoriously thorough. They are bureaucratic. They demand paperwork and follow-up visits. They do not typically clear a suspect in less than an hour, based on a quick glance at a clean kitchen. In the world of cybersecurity, we have a saying: luck is just a metric you have not measured yet. I did not get lucky that Tuesday afternoon. I do not rely on chance to protect my family. The visit from the caseworker, the timing of the extortion text, the seamless handoff to the federal financial detective, none of it was a coincidence. There is one final layer to this story. A layer my parents never saw coming. A layer the extended family sitting in that seafood restaurant never understood. I built my own table and I held all the cards, but I did not play this game alone. Let me take you back to the moment I first changed the locks on my doors and tell you what really happened before the caseworker ever knocked. Let me take you back to the very beginning. Let us return to the moment I found my father holding the metal letter opener in my home office, trying to pry open my filing cabinet. When I took the folders from his hands, escorted him out the front door, and revoked his babysitting privileges, I did not just call a locksmith to change the physical deadbolts. Physical security is only the first layer of defense. I am a cybersecurity professional. I know that when a threat actor breaches a perimeter, you do not simply close the door and hope they walk away. You assume the network is already compromised. You lock down the data. As soon as my parents' vehicle pulled out of my driveway that Thursday afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen island. I accessed the primary credit bureaus. I placed a hard security freeze on the 9-digit social security numbers belonging to Leo and Maya. When you place a hard freeze on a minor child who supposedly has no financial history, the system normally just locks the blank file. But if that minor already has active trade lines, defaulting auto loans, and maxed out platinum cards, the system reacts differently. The algorithm registers a critical anomaly. It generates an immediate automated synthetic fraud alert. I did not let that alert sit in a corporate server waiting for a random bank employee to notice it. I took the raw data and routed it directly to the Identity Theft Division of the State Attorney General. I opened a secure dialogue with a state investigator. I provided the initial parameters of the breach. I told them my parents were the primary suspects. We initiated a quiet background inquiry before my mother ever picked up the phone to dial the government hotline. This is where the architecture of Diane's revenge spectacularly backfired on her. When my mother made her anonymous call to Child Protective Services, she thought she was operating in a vacuum. She assumed she was pulling a hidden lever that would drop a cage over my life. She did not realize that modern state agencies share databases. When the intake coordinator typed my residential address into the child welfare system, the computer flagged it. The system recognized my address as the active location of a major ongoing financial fraud investigation involving minors. The Child Welfare Agency did not dispatch a caseworker to investigate my parenting. They contacted the financial investigator I was already working with. The two agencies coordinated their efforts. The investigator called me on Monday. She told me about the incoming anonymous report. She told me my parents were attempting to use the state as a weapon. We realized we had a unique opportunity. The Financial Crimes Division needed to verify the physical safety of the children before they could secure the federal warrants for the arrests. They needed to confirm Leo and Maya were not in imminent physical danger from the perpetrators of the identity theft. We orchestrated the Tuesday afternoon visit together. When the caseworker in the beige pantsuit knocked on my door, she was not a stranger evaluating my fitness as a mother. She was a professional executing a coordinated wellness check. She walked through my home and opened my fully stocked refrigerator to document a stable environment. She watched Leo and Maya playing quietly on the living room rug to confirm they were secure. She did not ask me questions to look for flaws. She asked me questions to establish a baseline of compliance for the official record. When the interview concluded, she closed her folder. She offered a warm smile and said, "Your home is wonderful, Everly." That was not a casual compliment. That was the predetermined code phrase. It meant the physical assets were secure. It meant the children were safe, and the federal financial trap was officially authorized to proceed. She left my house and walked to her car. I locked the front door behind her. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the entryway, and I cried. I told you earlier that I cried because of the chilling clarity of knowing exactly who made the call. That was true. But the tears themselves were not a reaction to trauma. The tears were a calculated performance. In my profession, we use a tactic called a honeypot. It is a decoy system designed to attract cyber attackers. You make the system look vulnerable. You make the attacker believe they have successfully breached your defenses. You let them feel powerful right up until the moment you trace their connection and shut them down. I knew my mother. I knew her patterns. I knew there was a very high probability she was parked in a vehicle down the street watching my house, or sitting by her phone waiting for a sign that her weapon had detonated. She needed to believe her extortion tactic worked. She needed false confidence. If I walked out of my house looking calm and unaffected, she would get suspicious. She would raise her shields and become cautious. She would never put her demands in writing. I needed her arrogant. I needed her sloppy. So I let the tears fall. I let my shoulders shake. I played the part of the terrified, broken mother standing in the hallway. I projected the exact image of defeat she was waiting to see. My performance worked flawlessly. Her false confidence surged. Hours later, she sent the extortion text demanding access to my children. That text gave me the leverage to send the proposed visitation contract. The contract baited Richard into sending the email confessing to the identity theft and the wire fraud. The email secured the federal indictments. I did not just survive their attack. I used their own momentum to pull them over the edge of the cliff. I built my own table, and I am the only one holding the keys. If you are listening to this story right now, I want you to internalize a fundamental truth about toxic dynamics. We are conditioned by society to believe that biological connections require endless forgiveness. We are told that family is a sacred bond, and we must constantly absorb the collateral damage of their bad choices just to keep the peace. We are taught to shrink ourselves to fit into the roles they assign us: the invisible daughter, the reliable ATM, the quiet backup plan. But a family is supposed to be a foundation. It is supposed to be a place where you are valued for your character, not exploited for your resources. When the people who raised you treat your hard-earned stability as an emergency fund for their favored child, they break the contract. When they try to weaponize your love for your own children to extract compliance, they forfeit their right to your loyalty. You do not owe loyalty to a sinking ship that demands you drown alongside the crew just to prove your devotion. You hold the currency of your own life. You decide who gets to withdraw from your energy, your time, and your wealth. When someone proves they view you as a liability or an obstacle, you have every right to close the account permanently. Set your boundaries, build them high, and fortify them with iron. Do not let guilt manipulate you into unlocking a door you fought so hard to close. The people who genuinely love you will respect your limits. The people who are angry about your boundaries are the ones who are benefiting from you having none. Guard your ledgers. Document your reality. When the manipulators try to rewrite history to cast themselves as the victims, let your evidence speak for itself. You do not need to shout to win the argument. You just need to hold the truth steady and let their illusions shatter against it. You are capable of thriving in a world that requires actual effort. They are only capable of surviving on borrowed capital. Never be afraid to let the people who treated you like a mere option realize that you were actually the entire bank. When the accounts are finally settled, the peace you find on the other side of that boundary will be worth every difficult decision it took to get there. Protect your peace, protect your future, and never apologize for walking away from the people who tried to sell it. The sun is setting over the Pacific Ocean, casting long golden shadows across the sand. I stand on the deck of a rented beach house watching Leo and Maya chase the receding tide. It has been a year since the arrests, a year since the federal justice system dismantled the illusion my parents spent decades trying to protect. My home is quiet now. It is the healthy, steady silence of a fortress, rather than the suffocating quiet of a hostage situation. I look back at the wreckage of their suburban empire and realize the destruction was a necessary baseline. To build something permanent, you must first clear the rot. Over the past 12 months, colleagues and distant relatives have asked me how I managed to sever the ties so cleanly. They ask how I maintain the clinical detachment to audit my own bloodline and hand the evidence over to a federal investigator. I tell them it was not a sudden act of bravery. It was the result of learning the brutal mechanics of toxic relationships. If you are currently navigating your own version of this nightmare, I want to leave you with 5 definitive lessons. First, biology is an accident of birth, not a binding contract. Sharing a genetic sequence does not obligate you to absorb the financial and emotional damage of someone else's greed. A true family is defined by mutual respect and safety, not an obligatory tolerance for betrayal. You are permitted to resign from the role you were assigned at birth. Second, learn to recognize extortion dressed as maternal concern. Manipulators will consistently drape their threats in the language of love. They will claim they are acting in your best interest while actively dismantling your boundaries. When someone demands access to your resources under the threat of punishment, they are not parenting. They are taking hostages. Third, silence is your most lethal operational strategy. When a predator breaches your perimeter, human instinct urges you to shout, to confront, to demand an immediate apology. Confrontation only grants guilty people the timeline they need to shred the evidence. Stay quiet. Let their unearned arrogance become the trap they willingly step into. Fourth, abusers rely entirely on your capacity for shame. They operate under the assumption that you will keep their secrets to protect the public image of the family unit. They weaponize your desire for normalcy. The moment you refuse to carry their secrets, the moment you drag their actions into the harsh light of a public dining room or a courtroom, their power evaporates. Finally, recognize that you hold the capital. Toxic dynamics are sustained by the competent, overlooked individuals who quietly pay the bills, fix the mistakes, and maintain the infrastructure. They may treat you like a disposable option, but you are the entire bank. The minute you close the vault, their fabricated reality starves. The ledger is balanced. The threat is neutralized. You hold the pen to your own narrative. Do not let anyone edit your worth or cast you as a supporting character in your own life. Protect your peace, secure your perimeter, and never look back at the bridges you had to burn to stay warm. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you found strength in this narrative, if you recognized your own reflection in my survival, please subscribe to Hazel Tells Stories. Like this video, share it with someone who needs the courage to change their locks, and remember to trust your own instincts. You are stronger than the legacy they tried to force upon you.